shall pray.
You think this is about you? Oh, this is about Yeshua HaMashiach. This is Love Live Ruach Remnant Reality Radio. I'm Rev Rock and I'm a Yahweh for Yahweh, bringing it to you.
Muted. The recording has started.
So, is nothing more appropriate than to put forth the truth in such a way. Now, there's a young guy. He's only, 32 years old. He was born in Germany. I believe now he's here in the United States, and he's actually a Democrat. So this is going to be interesting because I'm going to allow him to try to talk about what Tucker did, but what he presents himself as a Democrat is, and his name is Kevin Paffrath. Okay, so for me to show you how unbiased I am, I'm going to allow this guy who is on YouTube. He's got a new channel known as Meet Kevin. And he's a German-American YouTuber, landlord, real estate broker, entrepreneur, licensed investment advisor since September of 2022, but states that he does not give personalized financial advice through his videos. In 2019, he is described by Curbed as a landlord influencer. Paffrath was a Democratic candidate to replace fellow Democrat Gavin Newsom in the unsuccessful 2021 gubernatorial recall election, winning 9.6% of the vote. I can only think with an open mind that he would have been a lot better for California than Newsom. It would not take much. Of course, I wanted to see Larry Elder in that position, but this was the Democratic Party candidate that ran against Newsom, and Newsom has totally wrecked California. I mean, there's not been anyone ever in the history of the governor of California's position to ever do more damage there. So the positive news, the good news, is that Yeshua HaMashiach is still on the throne. That the truth is still what sets us free. And that we can come in with that in our heart that we are looking for, searching for, amongst all of the lying spirits that dwell within these people that choose to be on the side of evil, and we can learn to discern through all of the smoke and mirrors propaganda, again, that's always been around. It was around 2,000 years ago. They tried to make Yeshua out to be a bad guy when all along he was the good guy. And, we just went to Chosen, number 4 season opener this last week. And, another really, really exciting, come and see production that they have put forth. Again, Dallas Jenkins has outdone himself, really putting forth an excellent story, that is never been told. It's a side of the scriptures that you don't probably, within your own creative licensing of reading, you probably don't discern that when you read the word. And he brings forth the personalities and what people must have felt like as chosen people that were there at the time that Yeshua HaMashiach was bringing forth the truth. And of course, the Pharisees were constantly the political alignment that was against that, and they were saying that he was not the Messiah. He was an imposter, and etc. So, this last week, Tucker Carlson had set up to go to Russia to interview Vladimir Putin. and the whole world seems to have gone berserko and nutso in the process. They just were so against this happening, and many, including the leadership of Ukraine, supposedly from one of the stories that I read, that he put out a hit to kill Tucker Carlson, this Zelensky guy from Ukraine. So very much opposition against getting an honest interview. And I got to tell you, a lot of things that we suspected, again, here at Hebrews News, because we always look for the truth. We always ask for discernment. We wondered, if this wasn't a lot of propaganda coming from the United States, just like the Pharisees created propaganda against Yeshua HaMashiach. Are these people creating propaganda? Now, my biggest takeaway was when Putin started, kind of chuckling and saying, well, it's your CIA, and basically pointed out to the world that our CIA is one of the most evil institutions that's out there. No questions asked. And how could we not agree with that if we have any kind of honesty with ourselves? It's been very obvious in how Donald J. Trump has been treated that our CIA attempted a coup there, just like in 2014 that Putin described that they did in Ukraine. Our CIA meddles in other elections all around the world. How can we not believe that our CIA meddled in this last election and put Joe Biden in office, which is totally destroying the United States of America right now? How can we not believe that? I mean, you got to have your head in the sand to not believe it. It's so obvious that the CIA makes decisions, and they're not very good ones typically for a lot of us. And Putin points this out. And really, if we were to look at an intelligence level and having yourself together, if we were to compare Vladimir Putin versus Joe Biden, Vladimir Putin would be a lot better president of the United States than Joe Biden any day of the week. I mean, he runs circles around this guy. He makes this guy look like an idiot. And, honestly, I think he is an idiot. I think he's lost it. And even when he had his game on, he was a horrible politician. So what a bad choice for us as a country to say that we would take a failed senator for all those years, failure after failure after failure after failure. One of the worst crime bills that he did in 1992 harmed the people of color and then lied to them in the election that he is such a great guy for the black people. And still, just only a week ago, was in a black church trying to tell them how great he is, and they're dumb enough to have him in. And I say dumb. You are not, your church is an insult to my Messiah. And this is what's wrong with Christianity, is we've got leaders in the Christian churches that are so dumb that it is pathetic. And we can call it like it is here, because this is a Love for Truth network, and we don't have to worry about being politically correct or offending anybody. There are just, things that people say, things that people do, that they've got to be called out. They can't be allowed to get away with this kind of stuff. And we don't have to worry about being censored here. We can call it the way it is. Donald J. Trump is supposed to be the president of the United States right now. He won that last election. They spread so much propaganda and pretty much told all the media, including Fox, which really made me not really care to watch Fox anymore. I mean, I'm at the point because of the spin and the lie and knowing underneath it all how evil they really are, especially after, Zuckerberg and the leaders of all these different major tech companies having to go before Congress. I really don't want to be on Facebook anymore. I just don't even want to do it. The only reason I go back is because I know I have a lot of followers there. I have a lot of people that I minister to, and it connects me with some friends. But if I could just take all my friends and move them somewhere else and do a quick process, that's what I would do. Okay? So, X has been a breath of fresh air. I'm very grateful for Elon Musk. I don't agree with everything Elon Musk is doing, especially with AI and things like that. But I got to say, as far as free speech, I would definitely have to say he has made an impact on the United States that is huge. And, that is where Tucker broadcasted and knew that he was not going to be censored at all. And he's been censored in a lot of other places since this video was released, but he released it from his own network, which I'm not sure on this, but I think his own network backbone is through Rumble, because you can't trust the boys at Google anymore either. So, the liars, the cheats, the propagandists that work with George Soros and the rest of the crazies, includes, Facebook. LinkedIn, oh my gosh, LinkedIn is so evil. This guy that owns LinkedIn right now, and by the way, Bill Gates has a part of that company too. He seems to be just as evil as Bill Gates. So I'm calling out all the evil companies and all the evil people and asking you to work with me to boycott them and to start to use better networks. When it comes to getting the truth, Truth Social gives you a lot more truth. X gives you a lot more truth. Tucker Carlson Network, TCN, is brand new. It's giving a lot more truth. Turning Point USA, this is all in politics. You're going to get a lot clearer truth from them than you are anywhere else. So, again, this is all about truth. This is my main theme for this today. We're going to take Kevin Paffrath, which is Meet Kevin. We're going to take his commentary. He broke this down on the Tucker Carlson interview because, the whole thing is just translated, and it's pretty much, 9/10 of it is Tucker doing exactly that. He's interviewing a world leader, right? And he's just listening, and he gets to ask a few very intelligible questions, and I'm very grateful that he asks the questions that he asks. But, the fact of it is that if you really have your game on, you probably knew before this interview that Vladimir Putin has gotten a bad deal, but you maybe didn't realize how bad of a bad deal this guy has really gotten. He's got a bad rap, and it's because of our propaganda machine at MSDNC, at CNN, at ABC, CBS, all of them. Everybody is Russia, Russia, Russia. They're just hating Russia, and it sounds like Christianity is probably stronger in Russia than it is here in the United States. It sounds to me like there's less sin in Russia than there is in the United States. And you know what? I heard that from a missionary that they were having revival and that, now again, I'm not all for Christianity, don't get me wrong, but the morals and the values from the Christian belief that they have accurate, that has not been spun by the denominations that are within, but just the pure following of the Torah, the scriptures, like don't lie. Wow, there's a pretty big one. Don't lie. Again, this is about truth today, so that's my main theme is truth. And what did Trump decide he was going to call his network? Truth Social. Why? Because we got liars and leakers like the Jeanine Pirro book, Judge Jeanine, she wrote a book, Liars and Leakers, and was big time, hardcore, in the face of everybody out there. And what happened to her on Fox? Same situation. She lost her show on Saturday night because she was a little bit over the top, and Fox doesn't want us going that far. And the next one that's probably going to lose his show is going to be Jesse Waters. So at this point, Tucker Carlson has left Fox because of what? Truth, right? Bill O'Reilly has left Fox because of what? Truth. Glenn Beck has left Fox because of what? Truth. Megyn Kelly has left Fox because of what? Truth. So what does that mean? Somewhere within that network, there's a lot of what? Lie, lie, lie. Let's lie to the people. Let's cover up. Let's help the government cover up. And I am so sick of the United States government getting away with lying to the American people. And if you're not sick of it at this point, I got to ask you to do a 4-step examination in the Solid Scripture Step program called Transform Recovery. It's time you get honest with yourself and get some truth with yourself. Why would you be okay with people lying to you on Facebook? Why would you be okay with people lying to you on LinkedIn? And telling you, oh, our fact checkers have checked this story. I was telling a story about our ministry and putting something out there about Love Inc., and they tell me that their fact checkers are coming against what I know is the truth? I don't want to be a part of that kind of artificial intelligence that's already programmed against me, and it red flags me on my own content that I know is truth. How dare you? When you come against truth, you come against my Mashiach, Yeshua HaMashiach, hallelujah. You are coming against truth itself, because we stand with Yeshua, which means we stand for the way, the truth, and the life that is in him, and the existence that he is still alive today, and he will be alive forever. He overcame death, hell, and the grave. He, hallelujah, is the truth. So if you come against truth, you come against my Messiah. That means you come against me. Those are fighting words. You're going to have a battle on your hands. And on Hebrews News, we just don't mess around. We are all about telling the truth. All right. Now, that being said, I am going to put forth Kevin Pathrath, a young 32-year-old Democrat, just to show you how unbiased I'm going to be. A guy that ran against Gavin Newsom that, probably that election, by the way, was probably rigged, because Gavin Newsom is about as dirty can get. And, it's the highest taxed state. And there are very successful people, the top guy at ESPN, that has been a strong proponent for the Democratic Party. He stood for, Joe Biden, Obama, all these, and he is finally turn the corner, and so have a whole lot of other Democrats, demon rats, a bunch of rats that are demonic. The Democrats, yes, that's right. They are getting turned on by their own people, especially the blacks, the Hispanics, and the young people of the United States. Statistically, we have never seen more people flipping to support Donald J. Trump. Okay? He came to South Carolina, and the stadium was so packed out that he wanted to address the people outside that couldn't get in. And if you would have seen, I mean, this was like of Woodstock proportions. There was people everywhere outside. And Sand and I have experienced, and when we went, we got there late to Arizona, and Coco got inside, but we couldn't get in. And we sat outside, and there was a literal rock concert type proportion of people out there in Arizona. There is no way that Joe Biden won Arizona. There was no signs up hardly anywhere. There was nobody that you could talk. If you go to the gas pump and you say, who voted for this guy? There isn't anybody that will say that they supported him. So how the heck could have he won Arizona? There's no way. There is no way he won Arizona. So I'm just so sick of being lied to that I wanted to dedicate this Hebrews News to a subject known as truth, so that we could come together in one mind on this subject, and we could start to voice our views after this.
On Thursday evening, Tucker Carlson broke the internet. In this video, we are going to break down 10 fact checks on the Tucker Carlson-Vladimir Putin interview, and we're going to talk where we stand. What's next for Russia-Ukraine? What's an analysis that we could take away after Tucker Carlson's interview? We're going to do that right now. First, I want to just thank you. On Thursday evening, we had 150,000 folks watching my commentary of Tucker Carlson's interview live at the same time. This was incredible. That commentary video got over 1.3 million views, with a 22-minute summary video thereafter getting over 500,000 views, all in the span of about 36 hours. And that is a huge thank you to all of y'all. So if you're a new subscriber here, welcome. I do my best to be as neutral as possible, and even if I don't get everything right the first time, I try my best to fix it later on. The goal here is to be neutral. So let's get into it. Fact check number one, or maybe point number one, because I don't think anybody disputes this one. The media, the mainstream media, absolutely hated Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin. Almost every single media outlet that discussed the interview was very upset at Tucker. We'll talk about why in just a moment, but listen to some of these quotes. Politico said Tucker aligned himself with the enemy, that Carlson lied, that the Western media had not even bothered to try to speak with Putin, and that he's just a useful idiot. Al Jazeera says Carlson didn't pressure Putin the way he used to sandbag on pro-democratic guests on Fox News. He didn't even try to refute Putin's outlandish and ungrounded claims. Tucker goddamned Carlson served a very well microphone stand for the crazy maniac who for 2 hours rambled about how he loved to kill Ukrainians. Let me just take a quick pause there. I didn't hear that from Putin. Neither did I really align with any of these quotes I've seen so far, because I didn't so far hear any kind of real refutation of what Tucker or Putin said. There's been a lot of this backlash without actual real analysis and commentary. I mean, consider this. Chris Wallace claims that Carlson did not interview Putin. Carlson just sat there as an eager puppet. He cashed in on a Putin and asked nothing about invading a sovereign country, the innocent lives lost, war crimes, or anything. Calling him a useful idiot is an insult to useful idiots. The New York Times says Carlson's interview with Putin is a 2-hour marathon of delusions and fakes. Yet also almost no fact-checking, at least that I could easily find. Frankly, as an interviewer myself, since I interview folks like whether it's Peter Schiff or Kevin O'Leary, Barbara Corcoran from Shark Tank, or my interview with Patrick Bet-David, you name it. As an interviewer myself, there is a real risk of offending the person you're interviewing to a substantial degree to where they kick you out, they cancel your interview, they take your tapes, they ruin the potential of you ever interviewing anybody else. They prevent basically in such a case you would really prevent your interview from being heard by consumers at all. And so in other words, if in an interview you're way too aggressive, you're basically saying, hey, nobody like this person should ever come on the channel again, and the free flow of ideas stops. See, usually what I like to do when I interview somebody is interview somebody and then analyze afterwards. What do we think? Do we agree with this? Do we disagree with this? Let's have commentary on things afterwards. But to debate and prevent the free flow of opinions in an interview, when it's an interview and not a debate, usually doesn't go very well. Consider, for example, when a BBC reporter famously interviewed Elon Musk while trying to confront Elon Musk and turning it into a debate. Elon Musk turned around and suggested that the reporter was simply a liar, and none of the other parts of the interview ever became memorable.
I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's a false.
No, what I
You
claimed...
just lied.
What I claimed was there are many organizations that say that that kind of information is on the rise. Now, whether it has on my
Give me
feed
one
or
example.
not... I mean, right, and
Literally
you can look
can't
at
name
something
one.
like the Strategic Dialogue Institute in the UK.
So there is a real risk to actually alienating your audience when you're trying to let somebody you interview share their free flow of ideas. By debating somebody solely in an interview, what you're basically doing is you're robbing your audience of the ability to make their own decision. And see, this is why I like fact-checking things afterwards. Let them talk. Let them have their free flow of thought and fact check afterwards. For example, I looked at Boris Johnson's fact check because he wrote a fact check in the Daily Mail. And I'll tell you, most of it revolved around Tucker Carlson's interview was a tissue of lies. He betrayed his viewers and listeners around the world. Tucker was just a sewer for Putin's message. Why not a point-by-point breakdown of where things were right and where things are wrong? We didn't really get that from Boris Johnson.
Around the world, people are watching that ludicrous interview with Vladimir Putin conducted by Tucker Carlson, and we must not fall for this tissue of lies, above all for the notion that Putin is somehow fated to succeed in Ukraine. On the contrary, he is doomed to fail. Read about it in the Daily Mail.
All we got is, well, what Putin said is a lie. Okay, well, why is it a lie? Where's the evidence that it's a lie? Remember, Putin specifically called out Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was implicated by Putin as being the person who killed the deal Ukraine and Russia were going to sign as a negotiated settlement in Istanbul. Boris Johnson's response was, he lied barefacedly about his intention to invade Ukraine. He lied about the ending of the settlement. And that's really it. We didn't really actually get evidence. You could read the piece yourself. It's in the Daily Mail. It's literally written by Boris Johnson. John Kirby says, well, look, this is from the White House, right? One of the communications directors. There's bipartisan support for Ukraine. Don't take at face value what Putin says. Why? Senate leaders, keep in mind, Senate leaders did just fail to lock in another $7.9 billion amendment for Ukraine, so that's per Punchbowl as of today, so I'm not sure if there actually is bipartisan support right now, but okay. I did think it was very interesting that in 2019, you had Donald Trump encourage Zelensky to work things out with Putin. This is on video. I posted the links to a lot of this research and that video with Trump on ehack.com.
And I really hope that Russia, because I really believe that President Putin would like to do something, I really hope that you and President Putin get together and can solve your problem. That would be a tremendous achievement. And I know you're trying to do that.
Look, it's possible that I failed. Maybe I missed where the mainstream media really wanted to break down this interview fact by fact. But the reality is, I spent about 6 hours just this morning solely looking at media fact checks. And the vast majority of clips and quotes were simply, Putin's a liar! Why? Here's a second fact check where Politico is arguing Tucker Carlson is a liar. Tucker Carlson is a liar, Politico says, because Tucker says, it's not that America was going to launch a surprise attack on Russia. I didn't say that. And then Politico's like, well, Tucker, you're a liar because Putin says America was going to do that. Okay, so what does Putin say? Well, Putin says, quote, we know who the main adversary for the US and NATO is. It's Russia. And Ukraine will serve as the advanced foothold for such an attack. Okay, but wait a second. Let's parse this. Ukraine being a foothold does not necessarily mean the United States is going to conduct a surprise attack. There can be something known as a preemptive strike, which is, okay, let's say Russia starts moving tanks to the border where America is and they conduct a preemptive strike, but nobody's suggesting that America was going to surprise attack Russia. Now keep this in mind for a moment, okay, where we're going with this. So Putin's not saying that. Putin's not saying that America was going to surprise attack Russia. Putin's not saying that, or Tucker Carlson's not saying that America's going to surprise attack Russia. And Politico's like, you guys said America was going to surprise attack them. That's not true. I'm like, that's not what they said. So I wanted to clarify that. Number 3, the NATO expansion. Okay, this one is really disputed. This is a tough one. NATO expansion, oh boy, this one gets very heated. So let's just try to keep this as neutral as possible. According to France 24, they did a French piece on this. It's translated from French in 1990. I've got these all linked at ehack.com so you can see all my evidence. U.S. Secretary of State James Baker made to former Soviet leader Gorbachev during a meeting on February 9th, 1990, an agreement that NATO would not expand past the territory of East Germany, a promise that was then repeated by NATO's General Secretary on a speech May 17th, 1990, that same year in Brussels. Okay, so we have this argument that Gorbachev was made a deal that NATO would not expand east, and that was echoed by NATO's General Secretary in a speech on May 17th, 1990. It's a long time ago. This is like 34 years ago. 1991, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg was asked by Der Spiegel about NATO expansion and if they promised not to expand eastward. So about a year later. And what does the NATO General Secretary say? That simply isn't true. Such a promise was never made. There was never such a backroom deal. It's simply wrong. What happened after that? Well, in 1990, NATO accepted the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland. In 2004, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia. In 2009, Albania, Croatia. In 2017, Montenegro. And in 2020, North Macedonia. So as you can see, we've certainly moved eastward. Now, you have folks on both sides of the aisle who say, well, we never made a deal because look at Jens saying we never made a deal. And then you have other people quoting 1990 saying, wait, but you guys did make a deal. So basically, people on both sides are using different parts of history. And clearly, whether a deal was made, it was pretty much unmade very quickly. This is highly disputed. NATO claims it never promised it would not expand east. NATO actually quotes Gorbachev, the same person that France 24 said was in agreement with no eastward expansion. But in 2014, so 14 years later, Gorbachev says in an interview, the topic of NATO expansion was not discussed at all, and it wasn't brought up in any of those years. I say that with full responsibility. Not a single Eastern European country raised the issue. Not even after the Warsaw Pact ceased to exist in 1991. Western leaders didn't bring it up either. So, on both sides, you have this giant potential misunderstanding that unfortunately has been going on forever. Now, I will give NATO an argument here. When people say NATO is trying to encircle Russia, NATO has a really good point when they say, hey, this is how much of Russia we've encircled. The little orange line at the top left and the tiny little bit at the top right. That's it. I'll remove myself at the bottom. That's a pretty solid counter argument. It's still potentially NATO, well, it is NATO, right on Russia's border, which obviously unsettles Russia and Putin, but it's worth knowing that detail. Next, the Minsk agreements. Okay, these are really disputed as well. So remember that these are a series of agreements that started in 2014, Minsk 1, 2014, and then a little later in 2014 we had Minsk 2. These were ceasefire and monitoring agreements. Some people suggest that the Minsk agreement were never meant to be followed by Ukraine anyway, that they were just a tool to buy time. So basically, Ukraine wants to buy time, so they commit to the Minsk agreements. And Russia's kind of like, hey, Ukraine, and Putin just said this in an interview, Ukraine, you're not implementing the Minsk Accords. Why not? And Ukraine's like, well, we're not implementing them because you're not implementing them. And then you have Merkel's phone call, which just added fuel to this fire. Merkel, in a call with pranksters where somebody pretended to be a president, and Merkel fell for it, said that the Minsk agreement bought Ukraine valuable time. Ugh, this just adds complexity. Because now you have folks on one side of the aisle who say, oh, so Ukraine never actually wanted to fulfill the deal. And then you have people on the other side who say, no, it's true. A ceasefire buys a country time to rebuild. But then you have people who counter that and go, rebuild for what? Rebuild your weaponry? Rebuild your defenses and fortify? So you can see how muddy this gets really quickly. So this one is very clearly disputed. And that's a lot of the problem of what's going on here is the issue between Russia and Ukraine. It's not clear cut. If it was clear cut, it'd probably be a lot easier to solve. But it's very disputed. And both sides never actually made things crystal clear. Whether on purpose, because they never had the true intention of following through with them, on both sides, right? Or that's just the way things played out. Who knows? Now, there was a claim that it was disgusting for Putin to claim that Poles collaborated with Nazis. That would never be true. Well, actually, it is possible that both could be true. That Poles did not collaborate with Nazis, and that Poles did present and collaborate with Nazis. See, Poland currently presents itself as a noble victim during World War II, and Poland did suffer. In fact, half of all Jews who died during World War II died on Polish land. Poles resisted Nazi occupation. Some Poles helped hide their Jewish neighbors. The collaboration point of view comes from the fact that eventually you get individuals in Poland who recognize the Nazis have taken over, and you could either collaborate or die. In other words, somebody comes to your house with a gun and says, where are the Jews hiding? You get caught hiding, you're dead. Your family's dead, your wife is dead, your husband's dead, your children are dead. Or, people do this during war, they're over there. This is horrible. It's horrible, right? That would be a form of collaboration to, so to speak, save yourself. So, the reality is probably both are true. There are probably people who did collaborate with the Nazis. There are probably people who would rather die than collaborate with the Nazis. So, the odds are both are probably true. Poland today makes it a crime to say that anyone in Poland collaborated with Nazis. So, it's clearly very touchy. Now, another fact check. This one comes down to semantics. So, Politico argued that there was a decree banning negotiations with Putin. Politico says the president of Ukraine has legislated a ban on negotiating with Russia. Putin, or rather Politico, calls this a lie because the ban is actually on negotiating with Putin, not with Russia. Okay, so basically, they're saying Putin is lying because there's a ban on negotiating with Russia, but the ban isn't actually with Russia, it's with Putin. Point of this is semantics. Putin is the president of Russia. If someone said negotiations are banned with Biden, like Biden or not, negotiations with the U.S. would probably be dead as well. So this is semantics, and I thought this was a really weak, argument to try to get out there and fact-check Putin on. Putin saying, oh yeah, they banned people from negotiating with us. Collectively, for the purpose of this conflict, Putin is Russia. Number 7, fact check. A lot of people got upset about Putin's claim to be the largest European economy on the basis of PPP, purchase power parity. Putin's actually right here. Now, PPP is really complicated to understand. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. That's what I try to do on the channel. I try to keep things simple and explain them as simply as possible. All right, purchasing power parity. Basically, how much does it cost to buy a TV remote control, I'm making this totally up as an example, and a cup of coffee in America versus China versus Europe, let's say. Okay, and you know what? A rental car. So let's do a rental car, a remote control, and a cup of coffee, okay? Let's say in America it costs $400, and that's going to be our baseline. Let's say it costs $500 in Europe, and let's say it costs $200 in China. Well, in China, it costs half as much as the US. In Europe, it costs 25% more. So now what you could do is you can divide a country's GDP by a weighting factor. So in other words, if China's GDP is $13 trillion, on a PPP basis, because everything's half as expensive, you actually divide their GDP by 0.5, which makes their GDP look twice as big. Whereas in Europe, you divide by 1.25. It's a weighting factor. You're trying to put everything into dollars to weight it all the same, which actually makes, let's say, Germany's economy, for example, look smaller and Russia's look larger. So is it true? Yes. On a PPP basis, not, the Paycheck Protection Program, on a purchasing power parity basis, yes, Europe is the largest economy in, Russia is the largest economy in Europe. However, remember, it can be very, very inaccurate because it's not that easy to calculate the cost of a basket of goods in all these different countries and then adjust them. It is also complex because usually these adjustments don't account for the costs of actually trying to buy these things, the tariffs, the taxes, supply and demand factors. So there's so much adjusting to do. It's not a good measure. And so we could agree that purchasing power parity is probably a little bit of a bad comparison. But if we are going to use it, Putin is correct. Number 8. Why did the USSR collapse? So Politico says that the USSR collapsed because of economic and internal political struggles, and they complain that Putin said the collapse was initiated by Russian leadership. Again, I feel like we're trying to grasp at straws to call Putin a liar here. Both can be true. It can be true that Russian leadership was actually the reason there were internal political struggles and economic issues. Politico countered claims of Putin's argument that the U.S. controls the world's media. Politico argues media are privately owned. Yes, most media are privately owned in America, though, let's be real, the Twitter files have made it, or at least created substantial doubt in the independence of the mainstream media. This does not make all journalists bad. This does not make all media companies bad. However, Putin hits on American doubts. He's twisting the knife in a wound of suspicion. And Americans have the right to be suspicious. In fact, everybody around the world has the right to be suspicious of what they're being told. This is why it's nice to hear the opposite point of view. Everybody has their own propaganda, but at least if you are provided both sets of propaganda, at least you have a little bit more ammunition to see where the differences truly lay. Now, Russell Brand goes on a rant that's, I shouldn't maybe call it a rant, but let's just say he has a somewhat simplistic approach of the U.S. just wants more money for the military-industrial complex, that's why we're going to keep this going, which Putin hit on as well. And Russell Brand is probably correct. The military-industrial complex is very, very powerful. And many people in America are frustrated that we keep spending money for bombs and weapons for other countries. Look at the amount of money we've given Israel, and now folks are scratching their head going, wait. We're asking you not to invade Rafah City. Egypt is putting their military on high alert on the border of Rafah City, because that's right on the border with Egypt. And now y'all want to invade Rafah City, where you've got a bunch of refugees, essentially. And Israel's like, well, we got to fully eliminate Hamas. So, at some point, you wonder, like, if you keep supporting the supplying of weapons, are you financing people's other wars to where maybe their ability to make decisions could be skewed by the fact that you don't actually have to open your wallet? You know, if somebody's like, carte blanche, you know, here's as much money as you need for bombs and weapons, it's probably a lot easier to make the decision to invade somewhere or not. Whereas if you actually have to cut the check yourself, you actually have to start weighing things. Like, okay, do we invade here or do we invade there? Right? You have to pick. You can't pick everything. But if somebody else is paying for everything, it's easier to just go, I'll just keep going. Right? So, again, this isn't like an argument for or against Israel. It's just saying, yes, this is a fair argument from Russell Brand. Yes. And people are very frustrated in America about the military-industrial complex, the funding of wars around the world. Could we instead use that money to focus on our own needs? Now, of course, we have to balance this, because other people say, hey, well, you know, it's the reason America is deemed to be as safe as it is. You know, the reason for it is because of the military-industrial complex. They're keeping us safe. You know, this is obviously where debates can be had about the military-industrial complex. Take a shot every time I just said that phrase. So anyway, I wanted to give a little bit of that. It is something that has been the core of many videos, mostly because I think that is a pain point for a lot of Americans. If you go to Americans and you're like, should we keep funding, you know, bombs in other countries? It's very popular for people to say, hell no, spend the money here in America. And there are a lot of problems America needs help with. I ran for governor in California to try to work to solve those. Zelensky's father. Point 10. Zelensky's father. Putin was wrong about this. When Putin suggested that Zelensky's father fought in World War II, it was actually his grandfather. Zelensky's father was born in 1947, so that's after the war. However, Zelensky's grandfather did fight in World War II. However, he was an awarded comrade. He fought for the Soviet Union, not the Nazis. So something to keep in mind. Some other things that really aren't up for dispute. It is true that the Soviet Union did try to join NATO before the Warsaw Pact between, you know, the Russian side and various countries was signed, before the Warsaw Pact collapsed, and then a lot of those countries ended up joining NATO. NATO rejected Russia, citing a lack of democratic and defensive aims in Russia. So yes, that did happen. Some folks are picking up on Putin claiming that Ukrainians and Russians are one. This is probably false. You're probably not going to see a clear unity between the two populations anymore. I mean, you could go all the way back to 2001, where URAC conducted a poll, and we know polls can be misleading as well, but 67.5% of Ukraine's population declared themselves as Ukrainian and chose Ukrainian as their native language. 29.6% declared it Russian. Most of the time you're seeing their primary language being Russian on the eastern flanks, which makes sense. And as far as like nationality or ethnic origin, overall 77.8% of Ukraine's population self-identified ethnically as Ukrainian, with 17.3% identifying ethnically as Russian. Something else, and again, take these for what they are. At this point, I think things are so different between Ukraine and Russia, you're probably not going to fully assimilate. But yeah, you do need to come up with some kind of resolution, because the constant war is just ridiculous. Something else that we got out of this is, frankly, Putin's health. The fact that Putin is dead is clearly not true. That he has these massive ailments and is incapable of leading probably aren't true. So it's nice to kind of put some of those conspiracies to rest. I mean, I suppose he could still have cancer. You can't really tell, but anyway. Justin Trudeau respond to the Nazi argument. Well, that's the argument that why did you invite a Schutzstaffel officer to Parliament and give him a standing ovation. This was a big scandal, a big faux pas in Canada, and Justin Trudeau basically said the invasion of Ukraine was unjust. No response at all to the question, so punted the question. This is why I get frustrated about the lack of like fact-checking. Like, if the mainstream media is supposed to be so good, where are the real fact checks? Why can't somebody go, thanks for giving us the perspective? I don't know. So where do we stand now? Well, in my opinion, Ukraine will likely rely on IMF loans and budget cuts to fund its defense, as progress to fund Ukraine is stalled in Congress and probably will be until at least January of 2025, and that would be the end of January 2025 anyway. The interview will spotlight, I think the interview spotlights talk of resolutions for Russia, Ukraine, and this is good. We want people talking about negotiating this and ending this war. In fact, Putin invited for negotiation. The problem is what Putin said in terms of negotiation was blurry. There are some folks who listened to the speech from Putin, or the interview from Putin. It was somewhat a speech, given that most of it was Putin talking. Some people listened to the direct Russian translation and said that our translation wasn't as good as what Putin actually said. See, our translation is, what's there to work out? If you want to stop fighting, stop supplying weapons. Then it'll be over in a few weeks, then we can negotiate. Which is basically saying, let's mop up Ukraine when they don't get supplied weapons, and then we can negotiate. That's the way it came through in English. However, people who listen to it in Russian say that's not exactly what Putin meant, suggesting that Putin